talking about just big apartment complexes.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing rich.
Good idea. I'll start off. Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. 7 o'clock. Rise to pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 2, approval of the agenda. See any issues with it?
I'm going to approve.
Okay, motion to approve.
Support.
Or,
That's what they're working on.
all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the agenda's been approved. Go to call to the public. Make public comment this time. Just come forward, state your name.
Scott, Picture Boy, they do. I just want to say, I also want to tell Ross, but I haven't had time. It was too close to the meeting, I'll tell all of you. All right, I ain't got no problem with it. I just worry about it. The guy over here on Foster Road that's got the produce stand, if you go down Foster Road off 23, he's got a big ribbon out there, and he's got the stand right at the end of the driveway.
Is it west of 23?
It's just west of 23. My dad had his and the signs going up. Listen, he's just selling produce. He's been, it's no problem, it's not an issue. But he's got it right there at the entrance of the driveway. It's all brushy on both sides. People are pulling up there. I go down there. And I've seen it in my dad's place, but his is off the road when he was alive. And the kids will get out and run bombs up there with the wagon. Someone's going to get killed there. He's got it right out to the road. He needs to get it back off the road. I mean, produce stands is fine. He's got nice produce. But other than that, I think it's a safety issue. You might want to look into that. Because I just terrified that one little kid come out of the car on Foster Road there. Because they were parking on the side of the road. So just please, I don't want to see a kid get killed there.
Yep, just reach out tomorrow and we'll
Yeah,
look into
I
that.
worry about stuff like that.
Thanks, Scott.
You want me to sit on
Yeah, public comment?
Yes, sir. Jeanette Rapetta, Fuller Road. I'm here again, live streaming, because the last meeting held on July 11th, as you might remember, I came running in here and videotaped it for you. So just a little shout out to all the people that ask me why I videotape. It's because of things like that, because we have many videos that are missing. So this is not a workshop. So basically we lost a workshop, right? Because the last one got canceled. And I just want to know why it was canceled. I just would think it would be a simple explanation. I have emailed twice and I get no answer. But basically, so we've lost one workshop and it's precious time in revising the master plan. So I just don't know why it wasn't rescheduled. So I went to the website today to try and figure out where we're at. And oh, by the way, on your page, you still have Zach Michaels listed as the planner, so you might want to get that corrected. But I went to the page and I'm just still so amazed at how the process is. Because today, looking at the handout, it says what, July, what's the date of the document on there? It's a couple of months old, July 5th or something like that is at the top of the document in the handout. And then when you look at the master plan, you've got this part of the document, and then you've got all these different versions. You cannot go back and figure out what's been changed. There's very little track changing. So I understand that you're not gonna, what's so funny? I just, you know what, I get really tired of the lack of respect. I'm a citizen that has a right to be up here, and I get everything from looking down and not paying attention to what I have to say because it's not important, right?
Jeanette, you finish your public comment. I understand your frustration, but please finish your public comment.
Okay.
That way we can conduct the meeting. Thank you.
So the process for how it's being revised is very disappointing. There's the 9 documents out there. You can't tell what's what. When was, maybe you guys know, maybe you can remember in your heads when the decisions were made and what the changes were, but the general public can't. And I couldn't figure it out. So I understand again that you're not going to change course, but I do hope that going forward with existing documents, that, maybe you would employ that, ask some people how to do that, that there is a way to do that track changing and make sure that everybody can see and follow the chain of what was changed. Second, regarding the large-scale solar utility topic, the information in the packet is very cryptic. I see the maps that are in there, but I don't even know what to comment on, what to ask questions about. What is it that you're discussing tonight? And where's the revised ordinance? Because I can't find a copy of it anywhere and on the website, and it wasn't in the packet. So how do we as the public know what it is that you're going to discuss tonight? So I'm just requesting that going forward that you would provide some clarity, a little bit more clarity to your agenda, if you could, a little bit more information, which would just greatly assist, and especially assist in the transparency. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Get started. Okay, thanks. Go into old business, item 1, which is master plan. And Teo, I know you sent over pretty much the whole document. So is there anything overall you want to discuss? I know the commissioners have some comments.
Yeah, I mean, just in kind of keeping with, the timeline that was set up before my time, but kind of, from the planning commission, we wanted to get this to you. I know you've reviewed kind of some of it along the way, but, when I took it, it was 90% there, so we finished it up and wanted to get it in front of you guys. Tonight's really just any kind of feedback, comments, tweaks here or there, edits, whatever it might be. Just looking to kind of get your guys' feedback on it so we can take the step of finalizing the draft that you guys would then, if you agree, would then give a recommendation to the township board to approve.
I didn't make it through all of it, so it's going to take probably till our next meeting where I've read the whole thing as a one unit like it is. But is there any areas that you think we should highlight at this moment? I know.
All of it is
12 different documents, right?
Yeah, all of it in its totality is important. There's section 10 discusses goals and objectives. Kind of what are the goals associated with this plan? What objectives can you set forth to reach them? The future land use section's important because that's going to be something that you guys will reference, a lot as time moves on.
Yep.
A lot of the maps that are provided are informational, you know what I mean? Like we do our homework, but we want to make sure that, just from folks in the township, that information's accurate. Those are the ones that I would kind of point to as looking at section 10 and section 11, which is the future land use.
Yeah.
Kind of like making sure that we're where we need to be with those.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and then just one kind of question on the website. Are all of these documents individually put in there, or are they put in as one?
They have, so I know that there are portions of it that are on there.
Yep.
All of it is not on there. I was going to kind of gauge the response that we got tonight to then start updating the website.
Okay.
Because I see the 7/5, is that the update for all documents? So that's the date that we're dealing with?
Yeah, so that is the
I think we
date.
need to have a cutoff date. We're starting from this point. There's nothing that's trailing, right? Like, in other words, if we're going forward, we want to know where we're going forward from. And when I looked over all of the, for example, the maps and whatnot, it looked like everything we'd already seen before, and they all look like what we previously talked about. Correct?
Yeah, and so there wasn't a lot of tweaking that I did. I would say that most of the work that I've kind of come on to do have been the latter sections, probably 11 and 12. So most of the things that you've seen up to this point, there have been format changes, I guess is what I would say, but nothing of major context substance.
But this is 7/5 across the board.
This is, all of these sections are now at the 7/5 date.
Okay.
And so moving forward, this would be the draft to move
So
forward.
everyone can wonder where we're at. date-wise, this is it. Okay, I just want to be.
No, fair enough, yeah.
Are all the documents 7.5 on the website?
Not on the website, well,
No, I mean, not
I have to be
early.
careful, I have to direct, I have to go through them, my apologies, I'm still learning the etiquette of evening meetings.
But that's the question, I don't think that all of them, I think some of them are later dates. I could be wrong.
Taya, what's the plan to put this on the website moving forward? Are you still gonna put it in individual?
Yeah, I mean, we could upload it as a combined document or as individual.
I was
but-
thinking combined, but I, you know, just that way you don't kind of click them. I mean, I combined them all, we got them individual, but I think moving from this point forward, since we have everyone done in the draft, you know.
If you
I
don't,
think
you're gonna have pieces popping in and out.
Yeah, I think it'd be good.
Let's
I
keep
mean,
it all as one, takes a while to download.
I mean, I get an email, it's hard
Oh, yeah.
for us to email, but we can go talk with them, they have a way to send it to us, I guarantee you.
And
Put it on their
everyone
website
else.
with only us access or whatever, but I just think it's nice to have it all one.
Yeah.
And I do think moving forward, it would be nice to do the track changes, and so we can see where we're at, you know, with these last stages of review and.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Only question I had, it's more of a editing thing, but on most of these documents, it says see map on page XX. So once we have it combined as one document, obviously then you have to populate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there'll be an index.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, it's just if a paragraph changes here or there, everyone gets bumped a page and
Sure.
the exchange.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then in regards to the maps, you know, we were looking at the future land use map, for example, and we spent some time reviewing that one. And when you send us the individual document, I can zoom in and see it real clear, like the quality on the,
Yeah.
on the PDF. But once you put it into that, you know, into the overall section,
Yeah.
like, it's almost like you can barely even read the text.
Okay.
Could you have like don't they do like a different, like a sub text for those so they're in a high resolution? Potentially?
I mean, we
There's a way to email it?
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a way to get it into a combined document.
But I'm thinking just more,
So it's not, yeah.
more for when we publish the final document.
If we're gonna have a digital, I mean, maybe there's a possibility we can play with some of the, kind of an interactive where you can kind of click the sections in the index, jump you to it, maybe play with something like that. I don't know for sure, but it's something we can look
Yes.
into. Then you can have, you know, higher resolution maps and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Rich, you see what I mean here?
Yeah.
And like, I compared it to the other, like that's the text.
That's something we'll probably want to talk to the board about at the joint meeting, whether or not we want to do some more advanced digital
I think it-
interactive version.
I think it can be done just pretty simply. I mean, just look at the other document we had. I think it was, I don't know how you put the overall document together. Was that just a Word? And then you inserted a PDF into it?
Yeah, but the way we use GIS for all the mapping, so there's a way, there's people with more technical knowledge than myself who can get the resolution up on the place.
Download a PDF, you could have it high resolution.
Yes. But the final document is PDF also.
But I mean, for review purposes, I was thinking it.
Yeah, so maybe we'll start with goals and objectives, and I think overall we went through this and some of the other articles, but
Yeah, Mateo, on page 9.7 and 9.8, you did include the parks and recreation stuff in there, so that stuff's there.
Okay, that's what I thought. And I'll, yeah.
Follow. This is on community service.
Okay.
if it was that your only question, Kurt. I know there was a, dark skies is in a different article.
Put them all together real quick, all the PDFs, and we're at 14.9 megs, 15 megs for the whole plan. Is that?
Did you?
I got 6
No,
bucks.
no compressed. You got 6? You're even better. I just
I
did
mean,
it all
it's
out.
140 pages, that's nothing.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah, 140, 141.
yeah, so it's, it should be the 8 megs, probably could be,
Yeah, and I didn't even compress it. So yeah, it sounds like it's totally.
So, since we're not gonna go over this word by word, how would you suggest we look at just the goals and objectives and wander through that?
I'm on the same page as Rich, I've only got through 3. I read it word for word today, but I only got through 3 sections.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of time.
It does.
I got a question on objective 3. I thought our survey, we didn't want to expand the sewer system. It was very, I don't think people, we've already got to mess with the one we had before. I thought people spoke pretty loud about that.
I think it's more, well, the natural features like lakes is something where we may not have a hand in it.
Well, that's
Like
fine.
what would happen with
But
Onion and.
it sounds like we're doing it, and I don't want to do that. I mean, I hope we should encourage it. I don't think it should be in there. If the state wants to come there and force something, that's one thing, but I think we're encouraging it, we're putting that in there. You know, somebody wants to develop, if somebody wants to develop a piece of property, let them pay for the infrastructure.
For environmental
That's what we
reasons,
were,
I mean.
I think that's what we were talking about when we had that meeting, that hearing with the people here. That doesn't imply with what we were talking about. I think we're encouraging, we're gonna pay for it, I don't want to do that. When we had that, those meetings with all the people that came here for the master plan, people were pretty much on the same page about that.
Scott, I remember that during at least the one meeting that I was at on the Saturday, but I thought it was kind of, I think previously we had language, it was almost like, like development can go in if there's sewer. Well, then they just put more sewer, more development,
Yeah,
right?
it's there, yeah.
But I mean, what it's saying now basically is,
It was like we're opening the door that we're in for it, and I don't want to do that.
That's a good point. What is the previous language?
I mean, I don't want to expand the sewer system unless we have to, but we already got a mess now with what we got.
But, well, we don't pay for that, right? If the sewage developer wants, no, if the developer wants to expand it, they can.
If he wants to, yeah, well, we don't say that.
well, and it says in there, or when paid for by a development.
Depends on how many REUs there are, and that's units that can be expanded into the sewer system.
I just want to make sure we got the right language in there.
Yeah, and when we did this one, the intent of this is that we, like around lakes, that it would be used instead of having people have individual septics or wells, and then, I mean, septics that potentially have stuff going into your lake.
Will fail.
That's-
It's 50-foot long.
That was,
Sure.
I remember the conversation we had on this, but.
And that's one, right?
Yeah, one.
And I agree with that one, but the other one basically says other times when we would expand it, and that would be for remediate environmental hazards, or when paid for by the developer. So that's basically everything else.
Yeah. So we'll limit it.
So it's saying that we don't want high-density residential development in FRRE where there's no available sanitary sewer. We want it in areas that are already either future land use designated for high-density proximity, is how I'm reading that.
Okay, but then read 3.
I see that, but
I think
that's an addition. That's saying that, well, if somebody pays for it, and if it's in a reasonable area that could be high-density residential, then yes, we can encourage that expansion, but that's on the developer's dollar.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
That's the way that I'm interpreting how
Let them
that.
extend it, yeah.
Yeah.
Let them pay for it.
And number two is basically saying we want to limit it to where we already have the infrastructure available, which would be
Then the
primarily
question
along
is, who gets
23.
sucked in along the way? Are they forced? Do we force them? They don't need it? I mean, that could be another question.
Yeah,
Because
that's,
they gotta go buy people, they got the property. They got the property, why should they have to, you know, they're legally, why should they get into it?
yeah, that's,
I just want to protect a person, you know, that doesn't have to be drawn in.
I agree.
Yeah, it's the same page for the parks and recs, and you said you're okay with it.
I'm sure there's a little bone, but, you know, that's wrong. Unless you. They figure usually not.
What's the next step after we accept this? Is we're not-
This is one so the.
Where we're at, yeah, where we're at, for the commission, we're reviewing this now, we reviewed the future land use map and the joint meeting, September, what was the date?
September 8th, September,
5th or 8th, so early in September, we'll review this, and then
that's the tentative
The
date.
board
the tentative
The
date,
goal
it's not.
here, the initial goal, ideally,
Yeah.
is we give all of the feedback to Mateo. He's able to make revisions. We verify that we're okay with those revisions
Yeah.
at the workshop, and
Yeah.
then we can move to the joint meeting as the next step.
Yeah,
If we're not fully finished going through it, then that's going to push things back a little bit,
A month.
potentially. There's a number of variables, but it's likely if we're not able to get fully through it, which it's understandable if you're not fully comfortable with everything, if you need more time, I mean, that, it is what it is. But just so we understand how the timelines look, and we may need to push the joint meeting back a little bit. That being said.
But that's the next step.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand. Thank you.
so I don't know if you guys have any questions. I'll have some. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I just need more time to go through it.
Yeah.
This is, to me, it seems like this is one of those, gonna be one of those simple things that we just take home, read, digest, come back with feedback, because, I mean, we got it yesterday, right? So to be able to kind of go through 141 pages.
Yeah, this stuff was sent like
Yeah.
a week ago.
Well, I was talking about the
Yeah.
packet. Well, no, I get what you're talking about, but I'm talking about the packet from yesterday, what had included.
yeah, the thing we didn't have is as a, like one document, see, hey, how does it flow from one section to the next?
To the
But
next,
a lot of
right?
this-
Like, yeah, we've had like
Forever.
pieces and, but we've never had it kind of put together.
Yeah, but that was only,
Now that you get there.
and a question.
Exactly.
More to Ross, I know the golf course's parking lot gets used kind of like a carpool lot. In our township, there's probably.
That one?
Yeah, do you ever get any complaints from the
Never
golf
have.
course or anything on that? Okay.
No.
Just in our transportation section, it says explore the creation of a formal lot, but there is one just south of here and just north. I
there's
view
one
it,
down
this is
in-
my own personal opinion, I view it similarly like to the economic zones, how we talk.
The only place I could
we're in the
potentially
middle,
think
but-
where they could consider something like that would probably be the White Lake interchange.
Yeah.
Which is already kind of informally used on occasion.
Yeah.
They got
But
enough.
yeah, I don't see
Yeah,
an
it
issue
is-
with including that if it's necessary. I mean, all of those shared lots are gonna be within MDOT jurisdiction anyways,
Yeah.
along the 23 corridor within that right of way. More likely than not, it wouldn't make sense to do it outside of that.
That was two, I'm sorry, that was two.
other than that, from the goals and objectives, I didn't have any questions. I know that Kurt, you mentioned the dark skies
Yeah,
item, and it's in, I believe it was
there is,
Article 2, which article was it? 1 second. Maybe 6.
let's see.
So how are you guys gonna regulate dark skies? After a certain hour, when business slows down, they tone the lights down like 50%.
Well, there are things that can be done through the ordinances to enforce, especially in the commercial areas here, so that we don't have Captain Morgan that can be seen from space.
Yeah.
So, the idea is to, I mean, we live close enough to Fenton here that we're never going to be into the total dark skies, but we can certainly, I guess, mitigate some of the light that comes off of the areas here.
That's part of the.
Yeah, and a lot of that is part of our light ordinance.
Yeah, and it states that in 6.8.
The fact that we continue to have it in there allows us to continue to amend our ordinances as necessary.
Well, the question gets to be here, because there's two sides to every issue. If you encourage dark skies, do you then not allow a residential area to have streetlights, or for people to put up a mercury vapor or different thing, So we want to be careful how we address that. But again, it's, if you want to live in a rural area, part of that has to do with light pollution as well as noise pollution and air pollution, so. But I notice in here too, on objective 1 on page 9.1, that we did cover preserved tree rows and wooded areas in there, so there is a comment in there that addresses that, so that's one foot into the field where we're gonna go, so.
Yeah,
That's sort of a direction for an eventual ordinance or site plan requirement.
Yeah, and we currently do have, in our zoning ordinance, a lot of items that do control the level of lighting and how much you have from various uses. This is just to make sure that moving forward, we're justified in continuing to regulate or go further in our regulation of lighting.
Talking about trees though, that, if we want to limit it.
Trees, we do not have any ordinance.
I'm thinking
this is to create a framework, so in the future, if we did want to create a tree replacement ordinance.
What we're doing is being proactive here and giving ourselves the authority to look at this stuff.
I personally like that.
I mean,
Yeah, the rule of thumb is plan first, zone second.
Yeah.
And this is your plan.
it could apply to specifically developments of larger scale. It could apply to individual properties, depending on how far we wanted to go with it. That might be a policing nightmare, but on a larger scale for PUDs and things like that, I mean.
I know that happened down in Brighton when Pulte came in and just mowed down that entire one area with all the big trees. Everyone was just.
I know like Ann Arbor and some of those communities, they have tree
They didn't have
replacements.
limits for it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one where
I think it's a good idea.
where we struggle because there's the sight line from a driveway, right? Then the county requires, hey, take all those trees out.
Yeah,
We went
there's
through
a
that
lot of
in
different variables
recent
involved.
applications and,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's good to have it in here.
At this time, we don't know how feasible it would be and to what extent we could regulate it, but the intent is that we may want to regulate it in the future.
The way I see this is, what our job is going to be with the goals and objectives. This is how we sell the master plan to the board. So this is really the piece that needs to fill in for all the future land use and items like that. These are the things that we're either going to live or die by when it comes to what did you do, how do you think you're going to get it done, and when are you going to get it done.
So Steve, I have a question. So you being on the board, is there any...
You mean Kurt?
Or Kurt. I'm looking at Steve. Yeah, Kurt, sorry. So is there any ordinances that the board is looking to implement that does not coincide with the master plan? Maybe we have to tweak something. Is there anything from your perspective there that you can see come in?
Well, the one I think that we're grappling with right now is sightlines.
Okay.
And how to address that. So, but what we're trying to do in the master plan is give us a stepping stone to putting things into place, which we don't have now. And the idea here is if you truly want to maintain a rural background for the community, how do you do that with what we have? Well, we need to strengthen some of the things through what we want to put in the master plan, and then potentially we can address that by developing ordinances that support those. I mean, that's the whole idea in this process.
Right, I was just thinking of anything that may have caused any sort of issue in the past that we could learn from by, or, an ordinance level or something that we didn't have an ordinance for.
Well,
that's kind of what I was trying to get at.
I can go back and tell you that there are a number of ordinances that need to be tweaked in order to, and that's part of Ross's responsibility.
I can address that. I mean, if you're referring specifically to regulatory ordinances, yes, they are created as they become necessary. The most recent one would be the residential outdoor lighting. There was one extreme example that became a major issue to, the quality of life for residents, and the board decided at that time that it's an item that needed to be addressed. So from there, we drafted up an ordinance and they adopted it to address it. That can happen. It doesn't necessarily need to be specifically in the master plan for that to happen, but your master plan needs to be
It needs to be reflective though.
Yes.
Right.
So if we're aiming for the rural character and we have stuff in there about light pollution and just general rural character, then, I think that we're justified in adopting regulatory ordinances that reflect that, as well as zoning ordinances.
Our place is not to develop a bunch of more rules that people have to go by, but
I'm not an expert.
we live in this community, and we like this community. We want to continue the community the way the residents want it to be managed. There are several communities down by the Detroit area that want to encourage development, both industrial and residential. There are others that would prefer that the rural aspect of houses and developments further apart are better than closer together. So, you can look at Tyrone Township for that. That whole piece. So the driving force behind this is every 10 years we have to do this. 20 years ago, when they did one of the original plans, it's a whole lot different than it is now.
Right.
And it'll be different 20 years from now. And most of us, well, I won't be sitting here, let me put it that way. But the whole process here is to try to anticipate what the needs are going to be rather than be reactive all the time. And unfortunately, we're put in a role of being reactive when an asphalt plant wants to come in or whatever. And so the goals and objectives are going to allow us to promote the township and the rural character of where we live here. So at least that's the way I understand what people are doing, So the goals and objectives are what we have to sell to the board.
Right.
Well, it's kind of what the future intent is.
Right.
We're not trying to write ordinances, we're trying to just give general direction.
And I can add something for clarification as far as timing goes. I don't think you necessarily need to make the formal recommendation to the board prior to the joint meeting.
Right.
It's just kind of let's see if we're on the same page. Hey, do you have any additional feedback for the PC to consider? It doesn't necessarily need to be yes, and then the board gives the final say. I think that's more of a time for us to make sure everyone is in agreement. If we're not in agreement, to have that discussion and make the changes necessary. After which point we could basically make the recommendation at only to have a public hearing and then regular meeting.
You know, because we've tried to look at all kinds of different things to help us manage the process of development within the township. And that's really what we're trying to do. You can't really prevent development, but you can manage it.
You
And
can.
that's the idea of what the goals and objectives are that we're trying to do. And I'll give you another example too. It's like, okay, buried utilities. Is that something that we should promote or be in favor of, or do we care? Well, I happen to live in an area where the utilities are buried. Now, is that a good thing? Well, yeah, I don't have wires and poles and everything else in my neighborhood. Should we encourage other areas to do that? I don't know.
Wow, if you look at that,
I believe we
like
already
coming
have
down
that.
Pleasant Valley Road there, and they were trying to get those lines buried, if you remember this controversy in Harlan Township? And instead of being like a $2 million project, would have been $9 million, and they told the township, you pay for it, if you want us to bury the lines. You remember that?
Yeah.
And they said, we don't have $7 million to spend on this, and so they couldn't make them do it. I mean, and, you know, not to get down that rabbit hole, we're talking about the amount of power that's going to have to be brought in for all these EV charging stations and all that, this new energy delta we're dealing with. Good luck with that.
So,
Exactly.
yeah, Mateo, in the objective one,
This is
There's,
the ordinance discussion.
What's that?
The buried utilities, this is only ordinance discussion, and typically when we do our ordinances, there are areas where they can be modified
Right.
given special
Most new
circumstances.
subs are buried.
Yeah.
Almost all of them, right?
That's encouraged, it's strongly
And it
encouraged.
should be, yeah. Because that's not a huge amount of power.
But if there's a special circumstance like that where, you know, there's other variables that don't allow for them to be buried, you know, it's not feasible, then, you know, we may allow modification, assuming that it's signed off on, you know, both by
Okay,
the utility company, our engineer, et cetera.
How much does it have to do with what we're doing here?
Very little.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to, yeah, okay.
I was
I'll
using
stop
that as
talking.
an example.
no, so for.
Put that gavel out.
So, Mateo, I noticed in objective one, that obviously object 13,
Yeah.
there's nothing there, but the, I think 10 and 12 are related, but the item number 10 is, I don't know how clear that is. If you're not familiar with what these items
What goal are you
are.
on?
You're looking at,
Objective one,
Of what goal?
Another committee or what?
natural,
Protect, preserve, and enhance natural features?
natural environment
What page?
features, 10.5, so 10, the page is 9.5.
yeah, so 10, 11, and 12 just kind of reference different tools that are available to communities as it relates to the preservation of open space and conservation. From the perspective of that you can put together funds to basically pay landowners not to develop their property, because it's not, then you don't get into the gray area of a taking by limiting it so much that the value of their land is nothing. But you can go into an agreement where you actually purchase the development rights to say, we will pay you not to develop your property. It's more complex than that, and it requires, I mean, there's a financial element to it that, you know, requires more budgetary conversation. But those are kind of tools referenced in those bullet points.
Wouldn't they be like a park too? Park fall into that category?
Would it be like essentially like conservation easements? Like a sign?
Yeah, it could be that, and even if it's just a, you know, talk about a preservation committee to, you know, identify the high priority areas of preservation, you know, that's the tool for for identifying the areas that you're, you know, kind of elevating above others, and then the purchasing of development rights or things of that nature, or in some instances, the outright purchase of the property. But again, that all plays more into a fiscal budget role.
But this is literally just giving us the tools to
Yeah, it's explore,
explore
it just says
that.
explore, so,
Yeah.
I mean, it could, We explored
go
by
somewhere,
saying,
could go
no,
nowhere.
no, we're not doing it. Did we explore?
Yeah, no, from the survey and the workshops we had where people gave feedback, there was a lot of interest in these type of things, in those discussions we had. But I was just more wondering if like could 10 and 12 be combined, but I noticed it because 13 had nothing there.
I guarantee you I had entered it to create a space between
Yeah, no, it's
and objective 1 and objective 2, and it auto formatted on there.
yeah, no, thanks.
Maybe hiring someone to research grants.
It's in there. This is the only other one I was wondering about the emergency calls, how they're routed. I remember a big discussion on that, so it's in there. Start at the top, this is the future land use map article.
So I know we did a lot of work with the map and kind of getting that, in the state that was preferred. And then this section kind of goes out and lays out the general theme for each designation that we worked on. So it talks about, lot sizes, uses, things of that nature. It's not zoning,
Yeah.
but it informs an overall general preferred use of the land, kind of per the future land use map. That kind of looks at, again, what your current master plan has, what the previous master plans had, and then kind of the current zoning district that would somewhat align with the designation that we applied to it.
Yeah.
And then actually at 11.13, which follows that, not to have you rush through it though, but that's a good snapshot of how much land you're applying to each designation. And again, in kind of your preferred route of wanting to maintain the rural nature, I mean, you have over half of it designated to your agricultural natural, which is the larger lot sizes, things of that nature.
Okay, yeah. Questions, guys? I think was transportation analysis. We had some items on there. Yeah, just a question I had on how critical at this point is it if our language in our ordinance doesn't match your road classifications in the master plan? Is it that, like you have a principal, arterial, or a minor or major collectors in our, I don't know, I think in our ordinance we use different words for,
Yeah,
I was just thinking of it.
So the next step after we do the master plan is to go through our zoning
Yeah.
ordinance and make sure that that everything is consistent, so.
Yeah, I just,
Well, we should name them the same name that the owner of the road names it, right? So
Well,
if
that's
the-
consistent with the county designations.
Yeah, if the county owns the road, if MDOT owns the road, we should,
yeah.
so that,
There's more of a, like, do these match what county or state to describe them as?
To my knowledge, I believe so.
Being clear to everybody who reads it, right? John probably knows more.
I can review that in more detail. Because that kind of came into play a little bit, during like urban, is like, well, what does that mean?
In any development.
Any development, you get down to that one word, and it's like, that,
Right here, outside the road. That's where it's at right now. So that's remaining room owns a lot of property. He wanted to put it there years ago. Oh yeah, he still has the property. They shut that down. Where are they gonna go? That's Tyrone Township.
I have a quick question actually for Ross. A quick question about the light, dark sky light, residential. We have a ordinance.
We have a regulatory ordinance. Yep, if you look on the website under regulatory ordinance, we have
Because
standards.
I have a light on my pole barn right now. Is that something, I mean, my neighbors?
If somebody files a complaint against you, then we need to go out and evaluate it and see if it's within the parameters of the ordinance.
So should I lower the light or should I get rid of it? the light?
If it's not a nuisance, then you're fine.
and Ross, to be clear on that, that would only apply if it was built, installed after the ordinance was adopted?
Yeah, grandfather.
As a regulatory ordinance, I'll need to double check that. I think that if it was zoning ordinance, then yes, but as a regulatory ordinance, it's all lights.
I have it for 8 years now.
Most likely, it's not gonna be in violation. They're pretty generous. It's only for extreme cases where it actually keeps people up at night, basically.
No, it goes on the inside and around the pole barn, but it's not facing.
More likely than not, if we haven't heard anything, you're in good shape.
Ordinance number 49, correct?
49?
49.
That sounds right. I don't remember offhand. We don't look at that one too much, not since we enacted it.
Right.
And only was, I think we had discussed in our last meeting, the truck routes that are in the regulatory ordinance. I don't know if Mateo, those were updated into this map.
Yeah, so, so this reflects all of those, even the small chunk of Foley there.
Okay. All right. That's the only other item I had on this. I think I'm okay on this right now. You guys will see any more items for questions from Mateo. Mateo, at this point, right, the next step is, if there's no other issues with the draft as it is, right, then it's basically our draft master plan, right? And you're gonna consolidate it as one document and post it, correct? So I think what I'm hearing from you is after our next workshop, that would be done.
Yeah, so the digestion period ends when you say it does, from the perspective of any notes, feedback, any modifications and changes. At that point, then you, the planning commission, have a draft that you are prepared to provide a recommendation to the township board to adopt. So, but you also have kind of this, joint session planned out where, you're soliciting their feedback too, so that they're not seeing this they're not seeing this, hey, this is the draft, this is how we want it. They're not seeing that for the first time. They're a part of your review process. But that is the step the formal step is that you have to make the recommendation to the township board to adopt this master plan, whether that's the first time they've seen it or not. It's recommended it not be the first time they've seen it.
Yeah, understood, yeah, and prior to that, I'm just from a, more of a editorial or whatever, are there any pending items from us that we've missed? I just want to make sure that all of us are clear that it's on us right now as a planning commission to read this document. And if there's issues with it, we have to address them, right? So,
What I've gathered from where we're at right now is that everybody wants a little bit more time before you give the final blessing, well, not the final blessing, but the blessing to send it to the township board to have a joint discussion. So I'm gathering that Mateo wants to take the items that we discussed today and make those minor changes and then give you guys a little bit more time, come back on Wednesday next week and kind of say, yes, we're comfortable, or no, there's a few loose ends.
yeah, that's my personal thoughts, and I wanted to make sure we're making it very clear, so then everybody else, if they agree or disagree, and the commission can.
Yeah, I think the step is, because we have a few things here that have been noted, that I would hold on making these changes, unless you want me to prior to Wednesday, or come Wednesday, we finalize this list of notes, edits, changes, and then from there, we incorporate everything that was discussed into the draft that then gets submitted back to you guys to confirm, and then.
Yeah, I would recommend that route as we get through all these documents, if we notice anything, then we.
Yeah, and then it's kind of a one lump sum of, here's everything that we, and again, it can get discussed.
Yeah.
And formalized as to what those changes need to be at the next meeting.
Would that be the combined, complete document, the draft document at the next meeting?
Well, the workshop, I don't know,
It's a
I think it's pretty simple to combine, we can do it as one, but when you email it out.
I know it's big,
It's a
but
challenge, but yeah.
it is, but it's.
But the best option, I think, for all of us would be to put it on the website, and then we can each pull it off there and use it, right? All of us can.
Yeah. So that I can circle back with ASAP.
Yeah.
And what it will be is this as it is in its form now.
Yeah.
None of these things that we've discussed.
Perfect.
Like I said, then the whole list.
And that would be available for anyone from the township to review as well.
Yeah, we'll go on the website.
That seems like a good idea. Cool.
I don't know, anything else for master plan at this time?
I'm going to suggest an addition on page 9.8 again. Under the objectives for public services, we mentioned the sheriff's department at the top of the page there, but I think we need to say something about coordinating the fire and emergency response with the three different groups, Fenton, Heartland, and Fenton Township there, because there's nothing there in the fire piece.
As far as just kind of working with those entities in coordination, services.
Yeah, because, see, where we don't have to coordinate with the sheriff's department, because they're the ones responsible,
we have 3 different fire authorities that we have to work with. And besides the fire marshal. So I'm thinking that we might want to put in there, because we have had issues with response time, especially in areas where there's overlap of the 9/11 call centers between Genesee and and Livingston County.
Yeah.
So I would just suggest a 5th one there that mentions something about maintaining a working relationship with the fire marshal and the fire authorities that serve the township, something in there like that.
Great idea.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the objective is to monitor the services, and we talk about
Right.
the other ones, we don't talk about fire.
Right, and fire is the one that would take some coordination, because there's 3 different groups.
Sure.
The only thing it says about the,
Infrastructure.
yeah, about the dry wells, but just in general,
Yeah,
make sure the relationship's good and that we're getting what we want out of it.
I can bring up another issue, but talking about services, can we as a township get into the services of our utility companies? Because they don't maintain nothing. I mean, I can't even get my darn trees cleaned. I mean, you gotta see it down there.
It won't come unless.
5 years I've been waiting.
We can't,
If it knocks the branch down, they're not gonna come.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. We don't have nothing we can do with them? Well, I never you said, Steve.
No, I said I called them, they said unless the branch is down,
Well,
but
no, they don't care. We lose power every day, 2 times a month when storms come through. Seems we've got some kind of governing over them. Put their butt.
I don't think we can do
the
anything.
one thing you could be thankful for is you don't have DTE as a.
Was the planning commission clear for the master plan?
Comments
We
due
got a
by
lot
next
of
Wednesday.
reading, we got a lot of reading to do.
Well, you got 3 done. We got, now we got the important ones. Not that it's all not important, but some of them have more importance, I believe.
You talked about the cost of putting all those utilities underground. We're charging them for the fire run, for the fire truck, and what they pay these utilities, every time there's a storm, come out, do these wires, it's gotta be costing them more in the long run than to put them, slowly start putting them underground.
All right, so I guess we'll move to utility scale solar facilities, and so at this time, where we left off, we had multiple different items to address in the text of the draft ordinance, where there was parts of that, but the one big item is the discussion of an overlay district, which is what these maps are that are in the packet tonight, is to look at different places where we may have lots that could support it. And Mateo, I think I summarized it well, but there's multiple maps here. This is the one with it alongside the ITC corridor. These lots that are 20 acres or more, or 40, what was the?
Yeah, so with this, so the first map, what we wanted to see was, the ITC corridor just naturally is going to attract that kind of interest, just from being able to tie into the grid. So we wanted to look at lots that were 20 acres or more that abutted the ITC line. What we got wasn't too surprising to us, but, the ITC line does go through your more densely populated areas, and as it exists with the overlay, it doesn't really offer up, I would say, a reasonable amount of options for realistic development along the ITC line. So then after we looked at that and analyzed that, the next 2 that we developed were 40-acre lots or larger along US 23. And then also any FR lots 40 acres or larger, regardless of what they might apply. And the thought process for US 23 was that even though it doesn't necessarily tie into ITC, the right-of-way potentials might be more feasible with US 23 there. This one, again, was one that we looked at and didn't feel as though it was offering a reasonable level of options, which is why then we looked at the FR, because those are the largest lots. And we just wanted to see where can you get 40 acres or more in FR, regardless of where it falls in the community, and that's what we came up with.
Yeah.
From an offering perspective of having something be reasonable with restrictions per the language in the ordinance, the FR option was the one that kind of floated to the top.
So the first map is solar overlay for 20 or
20 acres or more along ITC.
Regardless of the current
Correct.
land
So
use.
what would in an overlay, what do you do? Do you draw a square over this whole area? Or is it just, hey, these lots are the overlay district? How does that,
It's the lots themselves.
the lots themselves?
Yeah.
I think the geometry in the area is irrelevant. I mean, if it's, you gotta stick it to the parcel.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if the intent of this concept or option is the size of the parcels,
I mean, it seems as though.
Yeah, I just want to understand how
Yeah.
it a plot becomes, hey, this is the lines where you can or can't, et cetera, right?
Yeah, it's by lot line.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems as though, again, it's kind of an up-and-coming issue that communities are dealing with. 20 acres is probably on the small side for, again, utility scale. And again, when you kind of go through that area, it is a denser portion of the township. And the existing land uses are probably pretty, cost prohibitive as far as to pursue doing utility in that area.
That's the utility.
Yeah, so,
Are you suggesting that the FR zoning is the one that you prefer?
Well, it's
See, I
not,
don't,
well,
like, personally, I would want to see this on either the ITC corridor or on 23. I wouldn't want to see it out in the rural part of the community personally.
sure. Well, what we're trying to establish is what is reasonable. Like, what is reasonable to develop and offer from the perspective of what type of land sizes that these developments would need. Because we can't.
yeah, and I guess, Mateo, that goes back to my question, right? The utility scale solar, right? That's a specific thing. And what does that mean? Is it by size? Is it by output? Is it by, and I think we discussed this when we were talking about the ordinance, that it should be
We have
defined in the
our
ordinance.
ordinance,
Yeah.
and basically, the county courtesy review, they came back and said that our FR zoning to allow it in FR zoning is inconsistent with our intent of the FR zoning district.
Yeah,
So in order to potentially consider it, an overlay district would allow for it potentially, but limit it to only the areas that
we decide.
would be eligible.
With the district,
Reasonably,
yeah.
yes.
No, and I'm just trying to understand, like, hey, is it X amount of power? So to produce that with solar panels, you need 100 acres. That's what I'm trying to understand. Like, is 20 acres, is that defined as utility scale, or is that just a?
I think it would be, based on what has been developed and what we know about in the field, we feel 20 acres is too small. It would be noticeably restrictive to that use.
So the other thing that you have to think about is the distance and how much voltage you're actually producing, and what the distance is between that area and the utility line. So for instance, going back to the first page here, you show where the utility line is, and those areas, those are all really legitimate areas where it could be, but there's no utility line, at least that I'm aware of. Correct me, over on 23. And everything has to be kind of on top of it. Because, like, I think, what is it, the average distance is only like 100 feet from a utility line is where the solar farm would have to. And then again, that's also based on the size of that and how many volts they produce.
Right, and so the distance or the proximity from ITC is a point worth making. It's also reasonable to say that if you're saying, hey, this is what we're offering, this is where it's feasible.
Right.
You wanna get to ITC, you figure it out and let us know, and we'll go through the process of approving or not approving.
Right.
So, you can lead a horse to water, but from this perspective, it's how they tie in, that's more on them. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that answers it
Okay.
perfectly. Thank you.
I mean, the 20, and the 23 option kind of spoke to that a little bit because there was just a thought that, there's state right-of-way there that
Right.
may be negotiable to use to run up to ITC. But again,
But then let's go on page 3, and it's just that's all over the
correct,
place.
yeah, FR is, right. But again, you've come on and said this is a reasonable size of land. We've provided an overlay.
Right.
How you get this to ITC is on you.
And you,
Yeah.
If it has to, this is making the assumption that it absolutely has to tie into ITC.
But part of the FR zoning is we want.
Yeah, no,
rural.
yeah.
And we don't want to, to me, this is like, the green FR is the most rural part of the community we want to maintain.
preserve.
I wouldn't want to see, a 40-acre solar field out in the middle, personally, again.
Sure.
It just doesn't seem like it's consistent with the FR intent.
Well, and that's why the ITC
Right.
was kind of our first run at it. US 23 was our second.
Right.
And it really wasn't giving us what we were comfortable recommending back to you as something that isn't going to be seen as obviously restricted. There is an option, there are ways in which you can do kind of primary and secondary overlays. So we might be able to look at something where we say, okay, the lots along US 23, they're 40 acres or plus, there's right-of-way there, this is where you need to look first. If you can show that there is no feasible way, or those lots are not available to do it here, then you can open up to the FR overlay to then pursue that. So you're telling them 23 is kind of where we want to focus this, here's some options. If you can't, if you can prove that you cannot make it work there, then you can go into the FR overlay and look at that. And then that way, at least you're offering up your preferred option, but there's also a backup, because going with 23 alone it's going to be perceived as too restrictive, we feel.
Yeah, well, personally, I would disagree. It's like saying, okay, if I want to do a mobile home park and I can't do it in the zonings, well, then I get to go to my second choice and put it out in FR zoning, because that's where it has to be.
There would have to be a process for establishing why you couldn't do it in 23, or along the 23 corridor.
I just think if you can't do it there, you can't do it.
And I understand that. We're saying that as we see it, as we've mapped it out, just saying the 23 corridor, we think might be seen as too restrictive for the use. A reasonable use.
So you're saying we can't restrict it at all?
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yes,
What,
we
that's what
can.
you just say.
What is it for the people that live on these lots?
Yep.
So I'm one of them. So my farm out there is called Red X's. And I'm just trying to figure out what you're.
Do you want to sell it or not want to sell it?
I'm not selling it.
Then don't sell it. Then don't sell it.
It's more than just something.
No, hold on.
Okay.
No, just so you're aware, what we're looking at is, we currently have a solar facility ordinance in our ordinances currently, and we asked the county to review it, to say, hey, do we need to update this? Are there issues with it? Because there's other townships around us that have had these applications come in, and they weren't prepared for it. So we asked the county for a courtesy review, and they came back with recommendations. And we're trying to figure out the best way to strengthen our ordinance, is what we're trying to do. So that's what this map is. We're looking at different options. It's not a finalized something we're changing or gonna do with the zoning classification of the property. Just so you're aware, as a property owner, is Ross and I cover that correctly?
Yeah.
Just wanna make sure, so he understands.
But it's
Absolutely, this
also
is
not
only where,
saying you can't come in,
Yeah.
and what my content is, all kinds of communities are saying you can't come in and successfully doing it. And we're not standing up.
My family was forced to sell land ITC back
There you
in
go.
1970. So I just want to make sure, I guess, I don't lose any more land.
If the state mandates it, then they could, but at this point, it's up to us to regulate and identify areas where it could be appropriate. We're not to that point where they can come in and,
We'll take it.
yeah, for solar, as far as I'm aware.
Oh, those places are for sale?
Yeah.
Are those places are for sale recently?
Unknown at this point. These are just potential options that they're playing with.
Some are for sale, you know, lots of 20.
Well, I can tell you on this map right here, that big section over there, that is all preserved golf course.
Right,
which,
I live there.
Yep, and then there's also open space area that cannot be developed within that. So I can see why that first option, why it can be perceived as being overly restrictive. If some developer were to come in and say, hey, you don't allow us to do this, we're gonna sue you.
Well, a golf course could be determined as well.
They could, but what are the chances?
I think, well, biggest risk
They
is
want to
that
sell it.
it's too high to best
Sell it.
use on the west side of 23.
No, from a,
That's the most.
and I think we,
Yeah, that's.
It's not a bad spot. But
But take us,
we can't.
other
say
communities,
no.
are they adopting strict ordinances and saying, take us to court? I mean, what's the other, what's?
I have asked around, we don't represent any townships that have outright restricted it.
We're not restricting it.
No, I know. And we are, you guys are kind of in the same boat that are, and at the same point that a lot of other townships are, as far as the language, the size, trying to figure out what is reasonable. I don't think any one township has cracked the perfect code on it. There isn't really one at this point.
Except for the town, I'm sorry, but except for the townships that have said no. And they're getting away with saying no.
Time will tell.
Well, time will tell about everything.
Can we set a minimum lot size for it? You have to have at least 80 acres, 100 acres?
We can,
For a section?
yep, and we do have minimum lot sizes under the current regulations.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
Yeah.
run it up to 100 acres plus. I mean, you're not gonna find it unless they buy them up.
But that's the situation where they can come in and say, hey, they identified these criteria which cannot be met. And that's what they'll bring along.
yeah, so I guess from a general sense, Mateo, like any application that comes in, that the decision criteria for us is if we have a concern from a health and safety perspective, right, then we're able to deny it based on that. And like when we were going through our ordinance, right, we mentioned, I think all of us agreed that, hey, we don't really want battery storage facilities. So then that takes and it defines where the area is that's feasible, right, along the corridor, just by the nature of saying, hey, we don't want that storage facility on site, because then it limits you to proximity.
Well, not
With
necessarily.
the exception of the US 23 corridor where they.
Yeah, if you could add power.
They can add
Yeah,
a transmission line.
yeah.
Like they did all the way to the thumb, I don't know how many hundreds of miles, but. And that's, last meeting we talked about, like, oh, well, this commercial property that's for sale, 14 million, maybe that prices them out. Well, wait till they get a handout. So
Right,
all these
exactly.
options are on the table.
Yeah.
Like you said,
Yeah.
they start buying small properties to make a big one. And you think, well, they can't afford that. Well,
Yeah, they do.
maybe you think, but when they get free money.
It might be the.
Yeah, hold on. So,
ultimate.
hold on, Matt, hold on. So for the purposes of like drafting an ordinance, if you're saying, hey, you're being too restrictive, right? Who determines that, right? Like,
judge.
I know when you get into this situation, right, like if something's challenged, it goes to a court, right? And there's a judge there that determines that. So, based on where we're at, right, as residents here, if we say, hey, this area seems to be the best fit, even though I don't know if we'd be doing the right thing if we put this overlay across the whole breadth of our township, right? down throughout all of FR. But,
Yeah.
you know, so that's obviously that's our challenge here, like what do you, and obviously everyone can have a different opinion of what's too restrictive, like you just delete the ordinance, right? Say it's not allowed, that might be what a lot of people think is okay, but then you clearly are denying the use, right? Understood, so that's kind of where if we could, I think in the ordinance, you're defining the size of the utility scale.
That's perfect for him.
I think that's important for us to say, hey, this size, because then you're not necessarily prohibiting somebody from having it in their own property.
Yeah,
Personally.
and that's, I mean, I think that language would find its way into the draft overlay,
Yeah.
if that's the direction that you want to go. Kind of with here, you know, it would be a minimum of 40 acres. You know, because that's what that's where it goes. I mean, you're going through healthy deliberation. That helps, right? You didn't just have a meeting, decide, and do you see what I'm saying? Like you're going through the steps of trying to figure out like what works.
Yeah.
So I mean that helps in your effort. Like I said, there's no magic wand on this as far as like what's going to hit the sweet spot for everybody. Like I said, I know that there's potential with a primary overlay and a secondary if you want to try to, again, really focus it in a certain area and then open up some other doors if that doesn't work out. I can go back, I can talk to Doug a little bit about if we were to take the minimum lot size up a little bit. And what does that look like visually? You know, if we went to a 60 acres or something of that nature in FR. FR is just right by the nature of the zone from the perspective of the way it was set up with its intent and the amount of land that's available per parcel.
Yeah, understood.
I'm
just saying, I know, I'm just here to.
I'm completely opposed to it going in FR.
Yeah, and when we went through the draft courtesy review from the county, and our consensus was remove FR from the allowable zoning.
But I think one of the
districts.
issues that we have is we do not have anywhere else that is currently zoned for the use.
Yeah.
It's allowed in various pyro districts.
Yeah, understood.
Which we
So-
have none. And there's no guarantee that it could be rezoned as.
So that's where it comes
Asphalt
from,
plant
restricted.
is gonna go.
Yeah,
Yeah, we say that we allow all these places, but those places don't
but
exist.
those places don't exist.
But what about, Ross, what about where the asphalt plant was gonna go? I'm looking at the map here, that's the north, I mean, that's along old 23 or 23. I mean, that's a good use right there. It's a lot better, I'd rather have a solar field there than an asphalt plant, I think.
Yeah,
everyone else-
that one could be included if that's what you decide, but right now it doesn't meet the criteria of
just saying
40
that-
acres or more.
Well,
Along the highway,
40
not out in
acres
the
or more?
country.
Yeah, if
that
you're
one
referring to
parcel,
the last
but I
one.
think he means that corridor where we had the pyro.
Correct, but I'm saying that that would be a good potential parcel.
This
And
spot
that's how we have it set up now. They could.
between White Dig Road and Fenton up there, that all for sale. They could put trees back.
That's
in there.
14, that's that $14 million, 200 acre piece. we're
Yeah,
discussing.
that's what I'm saying, that wouldn't hurt anybody there.
Oh, except for the environmental. and
Well,
all those
we're
things.
just looking it up.
Yeah, so
That no one
I think what might
We don't want it, but-
be, you're still working on the updates to the text, right?
I mean, essentially the text, as we last reviewed it, the
Yeah.
language that came into play was the conversation with the batteries.
Yep.
And with the limited amount of information that's there, at this point, we're just proposing deleting the language regarding batteries in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not allowing it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are allowing it. It's more of a case-by-case basis. And the thought at that point is that as more information becomes available about the battery storage, that at that point in time, the information at hand kind of informs how you can make your decision.
How big of a parcel will a battery storage take?
I gotta, sorry, I gotta work for that.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure,
so-
because I gotta go through that.
Yeah, so we can, and my point on asking about that was because it sounds like we have a lot of questions. Mateo, on this, as a planning commission, we have a lot of questions about these maps, is what I'm gathering here, and maybe what I recommend is for our workshop that we have the ordinance as you were planning to submit it to us, right? So we can review along with these maps, and then we can, because it matters, right? We already have the ordinance to look at, and there's correction, but we also have, and I understand it's a contentious thing, but we have a moratorium in place, and we have to address something, and the intent is not to create an ordinance and to say, hey, yeah, we're inviting this and we want it, right? We already have an ordinance in place today. What we're trying to do is strengthen it, so we're protecting our township. But I get it with the map. It looks like, hey, this is where we want to allow it, right?
Is there
That's the concern.
You're right on that, Rich. We're not saying that this is where we want to. We're looking at exploring different options.
Yeah.
Instead of allowing it in a certain district, allowing it in certain overlay districts. And we go by going through this, and if we compare it, not to say, well, we don't want it there because I don't like it there. If we compare it to the things in the master plan, and the reasons why, and we back that up, then if we happen to say we're not going to allow it anywhere, then we already reviewed it and we did our due diligence.
You got some defenses.
We have a defense. We didn't just say, well, I don't like it because that's near my house. There's,
Do we have the option to bring in some professional consultant from the state to maybe discuss some of the technicalities as far as, clearing up some of these questions that we have? And then, figuring out a collective goal and then working with him to try to figure out where, he would basically put it. Like if we did need to do something like that.
We could,
I don't know, and then work around that.
There's potential, but from our ordinance perspective, right?
Right.
What?
I'm saying strengthen the ordinance around that one area.
What are the
That's what I'm trying to.
environmental hazards of these facilities? I'd like to,
Right, and this goes back to.
I can't but I'd be curious.
Yes.
What is the justification for us to be restrictive on this?
Well, you're exactly right. We need to back up saying why we don't want it.
Right.
And back it up with data.
And that's the reason why I said to bring in someone like a professional resource for that.
And that needs to be balanced, how much do we need it? So,
Yeah, because if there's a bunch of downside to this, potential environmental damage to birds, or whatever, I don't know, but then that would be a justification for us to restrict it.
yeah, and read the master plan that we just put together and talk about the natural features of the township.
That we wanna preserve.
Well, it's all about preserving it and the real character.
So, yeah, but Ted, so I think what I'm sounding like, what I'm hearing here is that we aren't ready to say, hey, recommend X draft ordinance, right? So I think this definitely needs to be on the workshop agenda, right? And we, all of us, obviously, like you're mentioning, there's questions, right?
Could you get us some of the drawbacks or downsides or potential risks to this development? I'd like to see it.
Like unbiased too. It's gotta be
Unbiased,
unbiased.
right.
Yeah, we gotta have the right facts.
We need the facts, not,
We don't want crap.
yeah, we can't lean it anyway.
Well,
That's why I said someone from like, I don't know, like someone in the industry, some consultant from the state or somewhere who could actually,
Who has an extra-
give us that.
I've seen on TV where they were showing cattle around them, so I don't know. So they must be okay around cattle, but you don't ever know. There's so much being
They have
said.
cell towers in schoolyards.
So-
They say it's okay.
So I think, do you guys have any more?
Yeah,
Items on,
I-
just go ahead, John.
I do have a comment, I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but the first section of our ordinance, Tyrone Township recognizes the positive environmental impact solar energy systems promise as an energy alternative to traditional sources. I think we need to reevaluate that.
Strike that.
Well, the next sentence won't read right if we just strike it, but I think we need to propose a new sentence there.
Yes.
That is the first statement of our ordinance, so.
I didn't like it last week or last month.
I know, but we need to propose something, you can't just strike the next sentence.
Yeah, we need
is,
to do
the next sentence says basically how we gotta balance that with, the impacts that it causes, and just like you said. So, I think we just need to rewrite that sentence and make it more simple, like, we realize that solar developments occur throughout the state, and,
It's not just solar though, it could be wind, it could be a
well,
variety of different
but this
things.
section we're talking about is utility scale solar energy facilities.
Oh, in that section, okay.
Thanks, John. So, yeah, and so, like I mentioned, right, there's more homework to be done. So, anything else, John?
No, but, so is that, next week, are we gonna, are you writing a new one, or do we give it any comments back?
I mean, we had some small comments last time, but what we can, next week, as long as we all are prepared, we should be able to finalize that.
Yeah.
There wasn't too much.
I mean, we
Well,
can,
maybe.
yeah, we,
The
the
overlay.
things,
Yeah,
what's-
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Needs
what,
to be discussed more.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what's missing from the county language that kind of got incorporated into the draft that we'll work on for you guys? The only changes that would go there is the removal of the battery language, and then everything else that we propose to you guys as far as just the different studies and steps that would need to take place in order for approval.
Yeah.
So we can have, you know, a clean draft of that available for the meeting, and then kind of continue on the conversation as it relates to the maps and what the language says and things of that nature.
How much time do we have on our moratorium?
I think it expires in October, doesn't it?
Can we extend it if we're working on it?
It
We can
be
try,
ex-
yeah.
It can be extended, but
I mean, as long as we're working on
As
it.
far as I'm aware, I don't think there's any pressure, so I don't think that would be a problem, but you never know what's gonna happen.
I'm just saying that, you know, we're not like just wasting time, we're actually
Yeah.
trying to do something. so-
Well, that, yeah.
And evaluating these different options to
Yeah.
allow it is very valuable. We wanna either prove to ourselves that it's good for our township or it's not gonna fit us.
So we get
If,
through
if we
all
need
this.
more time, we can make that request to the board and they can see about extending it.
Okay.
Taylor, if you could, for our workshop, would you be able to combine this map with the ITC corridor overlay map?
Yeah, I can check with our GIS department.
Yeah. Anything else on the maps, guys? That's our biggest thing, we gotta iron out there. So I wanna, anything else on this topic? I just saw some hands up out there, so. I know there's no new business at this time, Ross, nothing, okay. So go to call the public. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a suggestion, I mean, I know.
Can you identify
Can you state your
yourself?
name? Sorry.
Sure,
Thanks.
sure, my name's Gordon Tomaszewski. A suggestion, I have some property I lease in Genesee County. The gentleman owns, it's a very large farmer up in the area. He owns property in Genesee, up in Shiawassee, and several other adjoining counties. He's also a developer. He's got a couple hundred acres of property, I believe it's approximately about 350 acres of property. It's right across the street from Crossroad Village. And he is the one that has tried to put a development, solar field development in, and he contacted a company and kind of worked an interim agreement out. Well, it went through the process through the township and it got shot down. So the only thing I'd like to suggest is maybe somebody might want to reach out to Genesee County, their board, and find out what they did and what restrictions were in place to keep that property from being allowed to go into being solar, into being too large solar fields.
Thank you.
The Genesee Township. Yep.
Great there.
I'd like to know for the workshop, the information like John's we were talking, like, you know, what a minimum size of the storage would be, facility would be for the batteries. And then, like Kevin said, we want to know, I want to know what the makeup of the batteries are. Now, I know we don't want it, but I still want to know information on what kind of products are possibly going into our township if they do come. Kurt, I know you, once again, you brought up the sight lines. And once again, I'm going to say it. Most of this township, we've already got most of the lakes developed. We only have open parcels pretty much, not very many open lakes. We already have established sight lines. The people's already got their houses built. So they've already got their sight lines and neighbors are happy. They bought their house, they're happy. The only time you're gonna run into a problem with sight lines is when they add on. And people are gonna have to know when they come to the township that they buy that house, they're gonna be in friction with their neighbors for those sight lines. So I think we have to protect those neighbors that are there. You know, you brought that up, and that's just as easy as pie. Because if they come and they want to add on to their house, they gotta say, hey, this is what you want to do, you gotta say how many neighbors you want that might be affected. If they're okay, then you can do it. It's that simple on that type of a sight line. So, like I said, it's not like we're developing these lakes. These lakes are already here. I think the biggest spice is when somebody buys a smaller home and expands it. That's when we run into the problem.
Or knocks it down and.
Yeah, but you gotta say, hey, listen, when you bought it, the sight lines were already established. So you're actually, you know, increasing, what's the word, real estate term would be encroaching into their sight line. So you just say, hey, listen, you're going past that sight line, you're gonna have to get their approval. If they sign off, then we're okay with it. That's that easy. It shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, they gotta respect that those people were there first, and it was already developed. So that should ease your minds there. I mean, to the new development, then you guys gotta work on that.
Thanks, Scott. Any other public comment? Go ahead, Jen.
So, Jeanette Ropetta, Fuller Road. Could you tell me where I can see a copy of the ordinance that we're talking about?
The-
Solar ordinance?
Yeah, the one that's been revised and things added to it, et cetera.
It was part of our,
Yeah, it was at the last regular
Last
meeting
packet.
agenda.
So that's the
It's on-
latest update in the last agenda. It's not on the website anywhere, a newer.
the document packet for, I think it was the last regular meeting.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'll publish that then. Okay, again, I found it very confusing on what was going to be discussed here tonight. I mean, I saw the maps, but I didn't really understand what I needed to study up on. A couple of people have mentioned ideas to contact the surrounding communities to find out how they're handling things. And again, I'm just going to say it for the record. There are communities that have turned this down. And the reasons why, I think, is that they are educated in what these solar farms are. And so I'm just gonna, I know you guys, I've told you before what some of the issues are, but I find it kind of, first of all, what I also want to say is thank you to you guys for bringing up the stuff that's concerned, such as that first paragraph and the things that you're talking about. I know you're all residents here and you care as well, so I'm very appreciative to see you step up and do that. But the environmental harm that is done by these facilities is well known, and I'm not an environmentalist. I'm a conservative. I believe in people, being able to build and do whatever they want to do, but I also believe in protecting and treating our environment in the right way and honoring our master plan, what the people want. So take a look at the radiation that's emitted from these things. Okay, they're not going to tell you about this. The amount of fossil fuels it takes to produce solar panels and what it takes fossil fuels for running and repairing them. The eyesore. The child labor behind this industry. It's a fact. And yeah, it's not our children in North America, but it's somebody's children. So take a look at what's going on behind this industry. And you guys all know that this is a big farce about the fossil fuel and how electric is going to be the way to go, and windmills, etc. It's all a bunch of bullshittery, and it's all gonna come crashing down. And so I'm asking you guys to please take a stand, because I believe it's up to you guys individually. Stand up. You know what's happening. You know what's being pushed down our throats. We need to go down kicking. We can't fold. And I'm just asking you all to do some research. Take a look at what these environmental concerns are, because they're many and they're not good. And the benefit of this, and that's it. Thank you, John, for taking a look at that first paragraph, because it's a really, I believe, a dishonest statement in that ordinance. So again, thank you. One more thing. Some of you may know that at the last board meeting that you have a planning commission member got up and made a public comment. So apparently you all can stand up now. You all can say what's on your mind. It was allowed. And so I'm looking forward to you speaking up and saying what's right. And also, I do believe that this is a perfect example of where the community could be involved. Get the community in here, create a committee and get people looking into these things, getting some input. And I have said over and over again, I will step back. I won't be part of it, because I know that I'm not, well, I don't have to go there, but I won't be part of it. But invite the community to do this, to talk, to find out what they're feeling about this. And so many things in this ordinance are, well, but, you know, maybe, and it doesn't seem that way, and the whole battery discussion. No, we should be saying no. We should be saying no. So I'll ask a question. I know I'm not going to get an answer, but did anybody reach out to those townships that have successfully turned this down? And I know of a township that the asphalt plant went to. I talked to the supervisor. The supervisor said, you come near our river, no way, out of here, don't even bother applying. Why can't we stand up like that and stand up for what's right? So I would support you in it. And if you're worried about a lawsuit, well, we've got a lawsuit happening this month that's going on. And who knows how that's going to turn out, but I don't even know what it's about. But don't be scared of the lawsuits when you're doing what's right for the people. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
What?
They're gonna have a workshop.
Yeah, but it doesn't involve us.
Okay. So, miscellaneous business, anything, Ross? Ross?
I do have.
Go ahead, yeah.
One thing, I don't know, that, like those issues that come about, like a major or minor amendment, it's like odd because we don't get to talk about that at the planning commission. So, you know, I mean, like the turnaround, you know.
You do get to talk about it at the planning commission after the subcommittee makes a determination.
Okay, but I mean, if we determine it minor, I'm just saying, I don't know, I just think we go back and forth in emails, but, you know, we're here now, so it's, you know, to me, that's one benefit of having a major. Or we could just say it's minor, but we still can, the minor goes to subcommittee, which is only us three.
No,
so
either way,
I
it
just
goes
think
to the
that's-
planning commission. It goes to the planning commission
Okay.
as a whole. You just
All right.
determine the process.
So
All you're doing
we're
now is
determining the
identifying if it's a complete new application or if it's just an
Anyway, so
exhibit or something.
now that I brought this up as miscellaneous business, I did do a little research, and I don't think a fire truck can turn around there.
I did reach out to the fire chief, and I did request that he updates the review to specifically address that issue.
And I don't mean, this is,
It's necessary to make a determination, so I requested, I know
Yeah.
that he was out there, I know that he did try to turn it around, I just
Oh, they
don't know
did?
the details
Oh,
yet.
okay, good.
So,
You know, it's too simple, it was already built, they just like test it out, and, you know? But that's
Yep, I have
my
a
thoughts
call.
on that. I just thought I would bring it up since we were here.
Thanks, John. Anything else, Ross?
nope.
I respectfully ask, could you explain to the public what the workshop will involve next week? Because both of these issues.
Okay, yeah, the plan is to address the same two items we addressed tonight.
Will the community be involved in any way other than public comment?
23.
Like normal
So
meetings.
workshop meetings were designed, they were initially put into place a few years ago to cover topics that there aren't necessarily time to cover during regular meetings. Decisions aren't actually made and they are as needed.
Right.
They're on an as needed basis or as possible.
So it's basically what you did tonight. That it's
Yeah,
not
it is.
involving the community other than public comment.
They can choose to if they'd like, but it's a public
Public
meeting,
comment.
but it is designed for the planning commission to conduct business.
Thank you, I just wanted to.
I thought that was more informal though.
It's set up more informal because no decisions are made.
You can't vote on it.
Workshop.
You can't vote on it.
No, but you guys are pretty free with us anyway.
As long as there's one discussion going on at a time. You know, as soon as there's other discussions in the public, separate from the planning commission, then in my opinion, that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. Sorry.
Thank you, guys.
Well, we're bumbling back here, we're
Appreciate
trying
it.
to explain something here for.
Thanks, Ross. We're good.
So we got a motion to adjourn.
Yep, we got a motion.
Support if you need it.
All in favor?
So we're all done with the community workshops then. Like we were all got together here and asked questions.
Those
That was
were visioning sessions as part of the master plan process.
Yeah, so that's all done, no more?
Yeah.
That's what I have to.
All right, thank you, good night.
That's what I thought.
Did you see the solar
And they're right next to each other.
vehicles? Stacking up on the bike. And the
Oh, yeah.
floor lighting? Yeah, that's just dying because. Yeah, we can't, so people